Even though the Mustang was already a cool ship, very sleek, we really wanted to bring it in line with what the Pioneer was doing. And that meant that we had to go back and sort of re-concept the Mustang, bring it in line essentially. It's one of the more unique starter ships essentially. So it's got its shape language is very different than the other ships. And it's a lot sleeker looking than the Aurora or the Reliant, for example. So more recently, now that we've got the Pioneer to work with for Consolidated Outland, we needed to flesh out the manufacturer style guide more. And the requirements for making the Pioneer the type of ship that it is led us to make some decisions about how Consolidated Outland treated its ships that then required us to readdress the Mustang. From a gameplay standpoint, we're not really changing the functionality of the ship. It's still its intended use is already defined. We're just streamlining the way we've achieved that. So one of the main things that we're changing about the ship is that the original had a tunnel sort of in the center that you had to climb up in order to get to the cockpit. And you had to do the same thing in the beta version to get into the habitation area. And it was really cumbersome to do that. It slowed down the gameplay. Really, you just want to get into your ship and be able to fly off. And the Mustang was getting in the way of that. So in the new version, we got rid of the tunnel. Now you climb into the ship like a normal fighter. Just climb up the side, hop in the cockpit, take off. The beta version will allow you to get out of the cockpit and walk from the cockpit back into the habitation area. And you'll still have to get out through the cockpit area. And for the variants, each variant will still be obviously available, except that the way we're functionally building it is a little bit more sensible, where we're essentially building the back half of the ship separately from the front half and swapping those out for the variants. So it makes a little bit more sense. So we have the habitation version, which is the beta. We have the Gamma, which is the racer, the Alpha, which is the cargo, and the Delta, which is the military version of it. There's some really cool stuff about the redesign for this ship. We've decided to move the landing functionality of the ship from the wings into actual landing gear in the body. And the reason why we did that was because previously the landing gears were the wings on the Mustang. And what that meant was that if you got one of your wings blown off, you could no longer land the ship. So for us in this particular case, we wanted for the Mustang to be able to take a little bit of damage, maybe lose the wings, but still actually be able to land a vehicle. Otherwise, you're kind of dead in the water. We still have the weapons mounted on the wing, so losing a wing is detrimental to gameplay, but the core functionality of being able to land and take off is now available for you in the new one.
The skids became a part of the shape language of the ship, which people fell in love with. Those long-tailed wings. So, hey, we're gonna throw landing gear on it. Well, do we need the skids anymore? No, we don't from a design standpoint, but it's a favorite feature. Right? It gives it a certain silhouette that people love. So reconcepting it was sort of let's make sure we transfer over some of these designs and some of these aesthetics that people like, and then give it a little more functionality. We've
also set up the wings so that when you land, they actually fold out of the way. They fold upwards out of the way, giving you sort of like this nice V shape to it. It's really cool. And overall, the design of the ship has been made a little bit sleeker. So everything is, the shapes are a little flatter, a little bit more streamlined. So if you look at it, it'll look a little bit faster than the original Mustang did, as well as looking like it's part of the Pioneer family. Now that we've sort of defined Consolidated Outland style, some of the guiding principles of the design is that we want, wherever possible, we want to have sort of big sweeping shapes. And most of them tend to be flat. You don't have a lot of changing shapes or complicated shapes. We'll tend to have a lot of detail in sort of the areas where we transition from one plate to another. In addition to that, because the overall shapes of Consolidated Outland ships tends to be a little simpler in terms of their surface complexity, they have a lot of surface area to use crazy decals, like humongous decals that sort of like spell out the name of a company, and they tend to use bright colors just to like, give it some pop. The other thing that Consolidated Outland tends to do is they'll tend to have asymmetrical ships. The Mustang isn't one of those, but their larger ships tend to be asymmetrical, and they also tend to have little sort of like boom antennas that are sticking out with detail off in the distance. and they'll tend to have that in different directions, which makes them look very, very different than Aegis or Anvil. Some of their spaceships, and you'll notice this on the Pioneer, it almost looks like it can be a space station, right? It's not your typical spaceship-looking vehicle.